Yeah, it is. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, it's pick your poison. I think a few years ago, if you described the team, because, Isaac Haas was such a massive problem to deal with. And they had four perimeter shooters or four perimeter older players around him that year. They had Dakota Mathias, they had Carson Edwards, they had, Matt Klein, they had Klein, and they had PJ Thompson. And you kind of picked your poison with that team. You maybe gave PJ some shots, but you either gave Isaac an island or you tried to take away or you gave up some threes by defending the post. It's very difficult to do that with this Purdue team. I just think right now they have 4 or 5 guys that can make upwards of 4 to 5 threes in a game between Newman, Stefanovic, Ivey, and then the younger Thompson, who's doing a great job for their team right now. And then when you add in the fact that for 40 minutes, you have 2 of the most dominant inside players, it's really not pick your poison.
What makes Matt Painter's offense so difficult to defend?
Well, number one, it's an execution system. I mean, they're going to come down on you and they're going to run a play or an action to get the ball to their best player every time down. And they execute at a very, very high level. I mean, it's not one of those deals where you're worried about their transition game on makes or their breakneck speed. You're worried about they're coming right at you every time down the floor. And they do a great job of executing. They do an unbelievable job of getting the ball inside in unique ways that's very hard to defend the post with trapping or keeping it out of there. I also think they run their perimeter players off of a lot of unique handoffs and combinations of staggers and triples. And there's a lot of different stuff. It's a tough cover in general. I also think Purdue, not underrated, but very, very valuable defense to offense team. If you watch Purdue when they make a lot of their threes, it's defense to offense. They hunt threes in transition, and they do a really good job of finding their shooters like Stefanovic and Ivey and those guys. They can break some games open. So, but I just think Matt does a great job of his execution. He's got an older team. If you talk to him right now, I mean, they got one mantra, and the bottom line is they have 10 guys all buying in. They have 10 guys all buying in. That's a big, big deal for a team that's talented because you usually have a couple unhappy campers. I think the fact that Travion Williams, who's a first-team all-conference Big Ten junior, is coming off the bench says a lot about the direction of what they're trying to do.
It's interesting talking about Duke and Purdue, John, because, the one thing that we kind of let Duke off the hook tonight, when you look at their makeup of their team, I think everybody agrees they have the makings of kind of that old Duke team that can be dominant defensively. If you really look at kind of what let them down tonight, down the home stretch, they weren't dominant defensively. If Ohio State makes their free throws, like Ohio State really attacked them inside. And Duke trusts their bigs. They play directly behind. They don't help. They don't double. And they got in foul trouble tonight, and they gave up a lot of deep catches inside.
Right.
One of the ways that they could overcome their three-point shooting tonight is by getting those big stops, because they're certainly capable. If you look at their defense is good. It hasn't necessarily taken that final step of being great yet. When you flip it to Purdue, I think one of Matt Painter's questions that he probably deals with every day is, how do they not get beat from behind the three-point line? Because if you look at their personnel, they're playing that one big. They give up a lot of three-point shots. And in March Madness, whether it be your conference tournament or that one night, if that team gets red hot from three, it does you in. And they're vulnerable with that. And I'm sure if, every day they go by, every week that they go by, they're trying to get better and better, more prepared for that period of time so that when they get to the NCAA tournament, that they have a solution against that high-powered team from the three-point line. Because Purdue on offense, I don't want to say they're a finished product, but they have more answers than maybe anybody in the country.
Let me ask you this. If you had to choose, you could go in tomorrow and start coaching one of these 3 teams: Gonzaga, Purdue, or Duke. Who are you walking in and coaching?
Man, that's an easy question. You really could pick any 3 of them. I would probably go with, in my mind, I would go with Duke, simply because I think they're the most complete. You know, the shooting part, I think creating more open threes, they'll settle in there. And I do believe that they have a chance to be dominant at both ends, maybe more so than the other two. But you're talking about three extremely talented, well-coached teams that have their eyes on that final weekend of the college basketball season. You know, I would also say this, Jaden Ivey, he's such a terrific talent. And I know he had kind of, in a way, a coming out party with them winning the tournament even before tonight's game. And you read about, you know, how highly touted and how highly ranked he is. You know, you start thinking things like, I've even read different things of, should a guy like that shut it down? And I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, think about this. Him having the opportunity to take Purdue to the Final Four, to win the Big Ten. I mean, you want to be prepared the most you can be to be an NBA player, to be valued in that next league, be the player that does that. And I think him emerging not only as an amazing talent and player, but also being that leader, bringing that will to his team night in, night out. You know, again, I think that's the other point with Purdue, that they really, that's something. Duke and Gonzaga have been there recently in the Final Four, whereas Purdue hasn't.
Now, wait, Arch, who are you picking?
Purdue. I mean, just based on this, number one, they're the deepest and they're the most experienced. You know, right now, Purdue's basically playing one freshman. He's doing a very good job in Caleb First. I think that both the other two teams are still playing with some younger players. You can say what you want. Bencaro and Keels are true freshmen. You know, Gonzaga has some, obviously, Chet and a couple other freshmen. You know, Purdue is running around with 9 Big Ten experienced players, you know, and they have some older players on their team. If they have a guy go down or they deal with foul trouble, the guy coming in isn't much different than the guy who started the game. Whether you lose to foul trouble Williams or you lose Big Edie, you're dealing with one of the two. At the 4 position, Mason Gillis is a 2-year starter if First doesn't have it going that day, you know. And on the perimeter, you deal with Ivy, but you bring in Brandon Newman, who started 20-some games last year as a redshirt freshman. He's a 3rd-year player. Stefanovic is a 5th-year senior. I mean, they are old and experienced. And I think the one thing that's very unique about what they're doing is their roles are very well defined. I mean, there's a reason I really believe that the playing time has been divvied the way it is. And I think those guys are sticking to the script. But they're vulnerable to a team that has, in my opinion, front court players who shoot threes. If you have a prolific team of 5 shooters, or you have that very unique small ball team, you've seen Purdue kind of struggle in the tournament with, I believe last year, who was it? North Texas, you know, smaller guys. But like, if you have that one team that has spacers and shooting from the 3, and you put their 5s in ball screens all game long, and you're not really doing a whole lot other than trying to pick them apart, you could see where a team that's prolific from the 3-point line could sting them. But you're going to have to guard them down the other end. And, you know, to me, it's a very difficult problem for them.